Biomed Nexus Daily updates your essential biotech, medtech, and pharma recap. No noise, just what matters. TLDR. The FDA granted accelerated approval to Replimune's Tudrikev in combination with nivolumab for advanced melanoma that progressed on anti-PD-1 therapy, ending a saga of 3 submissions and 2 rejections. A confirmatory trial is required. Curium agreed to acquire Lantheus for up to $8.0 billion at $102, $50 per share cash plus up to $12. Zeros in contingent value rights, creating a radiopharmaceutical company spanning diagnostics and therapeutics. Nordic Capital agreed to buy BWXT's medical isotope business for up to $800 million, and KKR took medtech contract manufacturer Integer private. Tarsus agreed to acquire Alkeus Pharmaceuticals and its once-daily oral therapy for Stargardt disease. Biotech IPOs have raised $6 billion in 2026, more than the previous 4 years combined at this point, with 5 more companies lined up to price. Moderna's mRNA seasonal flu vaccine was cleared, the first preventive flu shot built on mRNA technology. Executive takeaway Replimune's approval is the payoff of a story we have tracked since June, and it lands almost exactly where we said it would. 2 rejections, FDA reviewers calling the data package not interpretable days before the hearing, shares down about a third going in. Then a 10-3 advisory vote against the agency's own scientists and now accelerated approval. We wrote on Thursday that when the FDA is internally divided, the AdCom is close to a coin flip and briefing documents are not destiny. This is the cleanest possible confirmation. The panel weighed a 24.2% response rate in patients with almost no options, decided the unmet need justified the uncertainty, and the agency followed. The lesson for anyone modeling regulatory risk is that hostile briefing documents create variants, not verdicts, and the market consistently overprices them as final. Replimune shareholders who sold into that slump learned it expensively. This week we are watching something different. Capital is moving from pipeline to plumbing. 3 infrastructure deals just landed. We will pay that off Friday. Read full analysis. Oncology and regulatory Replimune got its approval on the 3rd try, over its own regulators' objections. Repl the FDA granted accelerated approval to Tudrikev, vuselimogene odur-paripvec, WTPG, formerly RP1, in combination with nivolumab for adults with unresectable advanced cutaneous melanoma who progressed on an anti-PD-1-based regimen. Tudrikev is an engineered oncolytic virus injected directly into tumors where it replicates, destroys cancer cells, and provokes an immune response. The approval rests on the IGIAN YTE trial, which enrolled 140 patients with 91 in the efficacy evaluable group, showing a 24.2% objective response rate and a median duration of response of 14.1 months. Both earlier rejections centered on the single-arm design, which the agency argued made it impossible to separate Tudrikev's effect from nivolumab's. The advisory committee voted 10-3 on July 30th that the results were clinically meaningful, and dissenters focused on that same design question. This is accelerated approval, so it is provisional. Replimune must verify clinical benefit in a confirmatory trial, and the ongoing Phase 3 will decide whether the approval holds. Reporting from STAT puts the list price at $45,000 for a full course before rebates and discounts, which Replimune has not confirmed publicly. M&A, the biggest deals right now, are not for drugs, they are for the infrastructure underneath them. LNTH Curium agreed to acquire Lantheus in a transaction worth up to approximately $8.0 billion, paying $102.50 per share in cash at closing, plus up to $12.00 per share in contingent value rights tied to commercial milestones through 2030. That totals up to $114.50 per share, a 38% premium to the unaffected 60-day average. The combined company would span radiodiagnostics and theranostics across more than 70 countries, and Lantheus goes private on closing, expected in the first half of 2027. The logic is worth noticing. Lantheus's lead product is Pylarify, the prostate cancer imaging agent that determines which patients qualify for radioligand therapy. Curium did not buy another therapy. It bought the diagnostic that gates access to therapy. That fits a pattern from the same stretch. Nordic Capital agreed to buy BWXT's medical isotope business for up to $800 million, and KKR took medtech contract manufacturer Integer private. Isotope supply, contract manufacturing, and the diagnostics that gate treatment eligibility are all infrastructure, and all three drew serious capital in a matter of days. Tarsus is buying its way into a rare eye disease. Tarsus Pharmaceuticals agreed to acquire Alkeus Pharmaceuticals, gaining gilduretinol, an investigational once-daily oral therapy for Stargardt disease, an inherited retinal condition that causes progressive vision loss in young people and has no approved treatment. For an eye care specialist built on a commercial dry eye franchise, it is a move into genuine unmet need. Capital markets. The IPO window is not just open, it is the best in 5 years. Drug startups have raised $6 billion through IPOs so far in 2026, more than the combined total at this point in the previous 4 years, and 5 more biotechs lined up to price, potentially adding over $1 billion. After a long drought, the public market is functioning again for biotech. The caveat we keep returning to holds. The capital is concentrated in companies far enough along to look de-risked, while preclinical and early-stage companies still struggle. Amgen's disclosure last week that its business development is shifting toward earlier-stage assets is the first real sign that may correct. Vaccines, the first mRNA flu shot cleared. Moderna's mRNA-based seasonal influenza vaccine was cleared, making it the first preventive flu shot built on the technology and completing what Biopharma Dive called a dramatic regulatory turnaround. The significance is platform level. COVID-proved mRNA works in an emergency. A seasonal flu vaccine proves it can compete in a routine, established commercial market against entrenched products, and it makes combination respiratory vaccines a realistic next step. China and global Chinese biotech won approval in a hard-to-treat bile duct cancer. Transthera Sciences Yokanra, tinengotinib, was approved in China for adults with advanced metastatic or unresectable cholangiocarcinoma carrying an FGFR2 fusion or rearrangement who have already received systemic therapy and an FGFR inhibitor. Bile duct cancer is aggressive and poorly served, and the post-FGFR inhibitor setting is narrower still. Separately, Biocon launched Yesafili, aflibercept JBVF, commercially in the US, adding biosimilar pressure in ophthalmology. Quick hits, revolution. Medicines rose after early indicators from a compassionate use program led analysts to raise projections for daraxonrasib, its pan-RAS inhibitor for pancreatic cancer. Intellia believes it has answered a key safety question, and Arrowhead moved to catch a rival, both notable in gene editing and RNA therapeutics. Jennifer Tolbert is stepping down after a long run leading J&J's pharmaceutical business. Evotec entered a research collaboration with Odyssey Therapeutics on small molecules for autoimmune and inflammatory disease. Ensoma cut jobs and narrowed its focus to its lead asset. Novo Nordisk's CFO described the company's financial year as a roller coaster in an interview timed to its second quarter results, a candid framing after a difficult stretch. Medicines wasted in England last year could have filled roughly 75 swimming pools according to National Pharmacy Association analysis. In today's full analysis, be sure to read the full article for all the details, including the complete Replimune regulatory timeline across 3 submissions, the IGNYT trial data and what accelerated approval actually requires. The Curium and Lantheus deal terms, including how the contingent value rights break down, the full infrastructure deal roundup, and why capital is buying the layer beneath drugs. The week in review. Monday, Roche axed a drug that worked to focus on obesity. We asked whether anyone can catch Lilly. Tuesday, the FT reported AstraZeneca and BMS merger talks. Novo's heart drug failed. Wednesday, Supernus and Indivior merged in CNS. Analysts called the mega merger unlikely. Thursday, Replimune won its AdCom 10-3, despite hostile FDA reviews. The merger talk was denied. Friday and weekend, Lilly grew revenue 48% to $23.0 billion. Amgen cut an obesity drug. Replimune won approval. Read full analysis. Biomed, Nexus, Pro Institutional Intelligence Brief. What Replimune changes about pricing. FDA, risk to Drikev's approval, closes a regulatory saga worth studying because it produced a specific, transferable lesson about how to model agency risk in the current environment. Reconstruct the sequence. Replimune is submitted, was rejected, submitted again, rejected again. Both rejections turned on the same objection, that a single-arm trial combining Tudrikev with nivolumab could not isolate Tudrikev's contribution. That is a legitimate methodological concern, and under the previous commissioner the agency defended it publicly. After that leadership changed, Replimune negotiated a path forward, refiled in June, and the agency committed to a compressed review. Days before the advisory meeting, FDA reviewers released briefing documents calling the data package not interpretable, and the stock fell roughly a third. The panel then voted 10-3 against the agency's own reviewers, and approval followed. The transferable lesson is about variance. The conventional model treats negative briefing documents as close to determinative, and the market prices them that way, which is why Replimune lost a third of its value on documents rather than on data. But when an application involves a genuinely contested methodological question and a population with few options, the advisory panel is weighing something the reviewers are not, namely, whether the uncertainty is acceptable given the alternative of nothing. Clinicians and patient advocates carry real weight in that calculation. The FDA explicitly cited input from clinical experts and patient advocates in its approval announcement. How to apply it? First, for drugs in refractory settings with no good options, discount hostile briefing documents more than the market does. The unmet need argument has independent force. Second, watch the composition and the public hearing portion of the AdCom, because that is where the unmet need case gets made. Third, treat accelerated approval as a conditional outcome rather than a finish line, since the confirmatory trial can still undo it, which is precisely the risk Replimune now carries into its Phase 3 readout. The broader read on the agency stands. It is improvising division by division without a settled philosophy, and that produces both the Capricorn no and the Replimune yes in the same week. Unpredictability is the operating environment, and the practical response is wider outcome ranges in your models, not a directional bet on whether the agency has turned friendly or hostile. Why capital is buying plumbing. 3 infrastructure deals in a matter of days, Curium and Lantheus at up to $8 billion, Nordic Capital and BWXT's isotope business at up to $800 million, and KKR taking medtech manufacturer Integer private is not coincidence. It reflects a coherent investment thesis worth understanding. The thesis is that infrastructure captures value with less binary risk than drug development. A therapeutic program either works or it does not, and most do not. The companies supplying isotopes, contract manufacturing, and diagnostics get paid across the whole field, regardless of which specific molecules succeed. In a period when drug developers are flush and running more programs than ever, the suppliers sit in an unusually strong position. The Curium and Lantheus logic is the sharpest illustration. Radioligand therapy is one of oncology's fastest-growing modalities, but it depends on a supply chain that is genuinely hard to build, isotope production, short half-life logistics, and specialized manufacturing. It also depends on diagnostics because patients must be imaged to determine eligibility for the therapy. Lantheus's Pylarify is the prostate imaging agent that performs exactly that gating function. Curium bought the toll booth rather than another car. The same reasoning explains the other two. Medical isotopes are a genuine bottleneck with limited global supply and high barriers to entry. Contract manufacturing in medtech serves everyone and is insulated from any single product's fate. What consolidates next? The most attractive remaining targets share three traits. They serve a modality that is scaling, they are hard to replicate, and customers cannot easily substitute them. That points to specialty reagents, single-use bioprocessing components, peptide manufacturing capacity, given the GLP-1 boom, sterile fill and finish, and cold chain logistics for cell and gene therapy. Samsung Biologics buying polypeptide for $1, $8 billion, and Replimune buying BioLife for $1, $5 billion in late July fit the same pattern. If you run a differentiated mid-sized business in any of those segments, strategic interest in you is as high as it has been in years, and the private equity bid is now competing with the strategic bid, which is what pushes multiples up. The IPO window and who still cannot get through. Biotech IPOs raising $6 billion so far in 2026, more than the previous 4 years combined at this stage, is the clearest evidence yet that the sector's capital markets have genuinely reopened. 5 more companies lined up to price could add over $1 billion. What reopened it? A combination of factors we have tracked all year. Record M&A creating visible exit paths, a friendlier regulatory posture producing approvals, strong earnings across large-cap pharma, and a backlog of companies that delayed offerings through the drought and now have more mature assets than a typical IPO cohort. That last point is also the limitation. The companies getting through are disproportionately those with clinical data, often late stage, which is precisely the profile the private markets have also been favoring. The window is open, but it is open for de-risked companies. A preclinical company with compelling science and no human data is not going public in this market, and it is struggling to raise privately too, with roughly 2/3 of first-half venture rounds going to companies that already had a drug in humans. So the correct read is not that biotech financing has recovered, it is that biotech financing has recovered for one half of the barbell. The late-stage end is genuinely healthy across public and private markets. The early-stage end remains the tightest it has been in years, which mortgages the supply of acquisition targets in the 2030s. The thing to watch is whether Amgen's stated shift toward earlier-stage business development spreads. If several large caps conclude, as Amgen apparently has, that the late-stage assets are too expensive and the differentiated opportunity sits earlier, that redirects real capital and strategic attention toward the starved end of the barbell. That would be the correction the sector needs, and obesity is the most likely place for it to start because the prize justifies the risk. One company saying it is not a trend. Watch for the second and third. Catalyst, calendar, date, event, tickers, August 22 Capricorn, Duramio Cell PDUFA, after negative AdCom April this week, 5 biotech IPOs expected to price multiple imminent revolution medicines, CNPV filing RVM Dimminent Lilly, Foundeo T2D filing under CNPVL lie ongoing, Replimune confirmatory, Phase 3 for Tudrikef repeal delayed BMS, Cobenfy Alzheimer's, Psychosis readout, BMY delayed, Novo CagriSema, Phase 3, Data NVO ongoing biotech, investment, National Security Act awaits committee, vote multiple 2026 Neladalkib, FDA decision, ALK NSCLC GSKH2, 2026 Arrowhead, ARO in BE, and ARO ALK7 Obesity. Readouts RDARQ3, 2026 Revolution, Daraxonrasib approval projected, Truist, RVMDQ3, 2026 Unicure, Huntington's gene therapy under review, Curicudrai, 26 Regan XBIO, Duchenne gene therapy, BLA filing RGNXQ3, 2026 ABVRE Apogee, Vertex, Crinetics, Ipsen, deals close expected multiple Q3, 2026 Merck, KJA Biotechny, close expected MKKGY Acept, 19 Ultragenics, UX111, BidUFA, Sanfilippo Type A, RareCept 29, Section New 32 Pharma Tariffs, effective all others, multiple sept OKT Celldex, Barzolvolimab, Phase 3 Chronic Hives, Data CLDX Nov, 14 Summit, Ivonescimab, FDA decision, NSCLC, SMMT Nov, 30 Vertex, Povetacicept, PDUFA, IgA Nephropathy, VRTX-DEC 2026, Mineralis, Lorundrostat, PDUFA-MLYS-DEC, 7 Lilly, Investment Community Meeting, LLY Q1, 2027, Rite TrueTide, Regulatory Filing, LLYH1, 2027, Curium, and Lantheus expected to close, LNTH 2028 generic drug tariffs, begin phasing up multiple Replimune 1 on the third try, and proved that hostile briefing documents are not verdicts. Meanwhile, the biggest checks are being written for isotopes, imaging agents, and manufacturing rather than molecules. That is our thread this week. What are you watching? Reply to this email. Visit the ProHub Read. Full article sponsorship slots for 2026 are limited. See packages and pricing